Today about developing a high level of emotional resistance or coping strategies for high pressure environments. Maybe. Okay. Then this is the right slide. All right. So what is emotional resilience? It is having the adaptability to adjust and evolve in the face of change or adversity. That's just it. Just being able to bounce back, pivot, get to what you need to get to instead of focusing on what happened, the negatives, getting stuck in the doldrum of whatever the adversity is. It is also very reliant on self-awareness, being able to recognize and understand your own emotions, strengths, limitations, and triggers, especially things that would trigger you to behave in a way that you do not choose to behave. Then another aspect of emotional resilience is optimism, maintaining a positive outlook, both focusing on growth opportunities rather than fixating on the problems. And that's not the toxic form of optimism, right? Like, there are times when some people will pretend that everything's fine in order to avoid their problems or avoid dealing with things. So just slapping happiness on top of things is not necessarily a healthy form of optimism. However, looking at a situation and finding the good in it is. So the example is COVID. We can focus on all the things we couldn't do during COVID, or we can focus on the things that we were allowed to do because of COVID, connecting with friends and family that live far away, for example. Then lastly is stress management. This is the part where I talk about spoon theory. David, do you know spoon theory? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I do not actually know about spoon theory.
Okay, well, I get to teach it to everybody then. Yay. So if you're a Brene Brown fan, you've probably heard of spoon theory before. It is a metaphor for your capacity. So imagine everybody wakes up with the same number of spoons. Everybody gets 20 spoons when they wake up. It's a metaphor for your capacity to deal with challenges and things that come at you throughout your day without behaving in a way that you didn't choose to. So let's say we wake up with 20 spoons. If you have a chronic illness or a disability, you may start out with fewer spoons than someone who does not have those challenges. But let's say it's me, I'm starting out with 20 spoons. So I wake up, put my feet down by the bed, and squish, cat puke. So I've got cat puke between my toes, I have to go wash my foot, I have to clean the carpet. That is 2 spoons gone. So now I've got 18 spoons. So I'm driving to work, and some great big old pickup cuts me off, right? And I'm yelling and screaming, this jerk doesn't care that he almost ran me off the road, all the things. So do I actually know how that person thought about that action? I do not. It's the story I'm telling myself, and by telling myself that, 2 more spoons, gone. Now I'm getting to work. I've got 16 spoons left, and it's a really hard day. I forgot about a deadline, and now I've got to crunch, 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 get something done. My whole day just took 14 more spoons. I'm on the drive home, run out of gas, a mile from the gas station. That is the last of my spoons. So I get home, I've still got day left, but I don't have any spoons left, which means that when I walk in the door, exhausted, ready to just veg out, and the kids go, "What's for dinner, Mommy?" Boom, I'm gonna explode because I'm out of spoons. So I was not able to react in that situation the way that I wanted to react. Make sense?
Jessica, may I add something real fast?
Yeah.
So I'm going to stand up. I'm in the corner. Hi, everyone. David Ziebler here in partnership with Jessica Derhake. So I learned about spoon theory, and just now, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. But I have a similar theory, and it's really about how pressure builds in a person. So spoon theory is taking what you have away from you, right? Which essentially represents the resilience that you have in order to avoid acting in an undesirable way, right? And that's why we're here today, right? You want to build up your resilience to handle the stressors of the day, probably so that you don't react the way that you don't want to with your loved ones, your family members. Let's face it, your coworkers or your boss. Your job is quite literally on the line if your level or your ability to tolerate resistance is nil. So what I do is I think of it as pressure building. Okay, so spoon theory is taking things away. As stressors affect us, pressure builds. And much like with a volcano, there's a certain level, right, that we can reach before we explode. To kind of riff off what you said there, Jessica, the idea is not just to be adaptable, but self-aware and optimistic and manage your stress. The idea is to think about ways in which you can actually recover some of those spoons as the day goes on, and or to relieve or siphon off some of that pressure, to delay and or reduce the amount that you actually do act in that desirable way. Now, the next step is to think about, well, if I had 20 spoons, right, when I was 36 or when I'm 42, how many spoons did I actually start with? Because we can get to 20, but what if we originally started with 30 when things were good? Do y'all remember high school? When we had no responsibilities, right? Maybe our parents gave us gas money, that sort of a thing. We had no bills, we had no kids. Nobody depended on us. We didn't have to have a job. Whew, those were nice days, right? That's why high school movies and dramas are so popular, because we remember how easy we had it, right? So did we lose spoons? How do we get those spoons back? Did we have more of a capacity for the lava to be lower than it is now? So thinking about adaptability, self-awareness, right? Where you're at, where the lava is, how many spoons you have or used to have. And again, thinking about what is good so that we can cope with the stress is about thinking how or what can I do, right, to be more emotionally resilient to the stressors that come through every
We can't hear you.
guys hear us now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Sorry about that. I'm not sure why the room keeps muting itself.
Any luck?
Yep, I just kicked the room off and called back.
Okay.
So it should be good. Sorry about that, guys.
It's all right. Are we able to get the PowerPoint
Yep.
back up? Can everybody hear us okay?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
All right, we'll pick back up where we left off,
Oh, it's coming up.
which is the resilience journey, or a timeline towards building up your stockpile of spoons, your capacity, your resilience, whatever you want to call it. So step one is cultivating your self-awareness and emotional intelligence. I know David talks a lot about emotional intelligence, knowing yourself. It's incredibly important to begin building your resilience, to know where your edges are, where your limits are, what's going to push you over the edge, what's going to take the last of your spoons by surprise. Milestone 2 is building coping mechanisms for those triggers. David, can you tell us about the thumb thing when you get stressed?
Oh yeah, sure. So let's go to milestone 1 to introduce that real fast. So a lot of people deal with folks that irritate them, right? You can't always like everybody in your circle or at your work. You can't always get along with folks. Some people just rub you the wrong way. So what I have done is I have developed a method for dealing with that in the moment when you are unable to siphon off some of that pressure, some of that frustration. And that is to, as you are, for example, sitting in a meeting, it is important to think about how your body's responding, which is milestone number 1, and know yourself, know what's triggering. Feel the feelings that you have. So if you're beginning to get hot, if you're beginning to feel the anger welling up inside of your body, your chest, I recommend doing things that are physical to deal with that, like curling your toes within your shoes. No one is going to see you do that, okay? But the flexion and the tension and the contraction of those muscles helps your body work through the adrenaline spike that is going in that moment. Additionally, no one has to see your hands. So if you need to fidget, right, or it would be too visually distracting to begin to do deep breaths, which is a great way to stay present, put your hand underneath the desk that you're on and make a circle with your thumb around your pointer finger, rubbing it slightly and slowly, okay? So no one's gonna see you curling your toes. No one's gonna see you doing this motion where you circle your thumb again, pressing down against your pointer finger, but you're gonna be able to stay present because again, your body's working through that adrenaline spike that is caused by the anger, the frustration, the anxiety, whatever it might be. So first, know thyself, right? Know that I'm walking into a meeting with so-and-so. He or she is going to upset me, or the P word, right? P-I-S-S-E-D. We don't say it in our house. I have 9-year-olds. We're trying to grow them up right. So I'm not going to say it here, but that being said, know that, you know what, I'm probably going to have to curl some toes and rub my thumb on my finger, right? Or I'm going to have to, and it's okay, excuse myself to quote unquote use the restroom.
Very good, thank you. So really what it comes down to is having a plan in advance for when you are feeling activated so that you can pull your mind from that activation state back to the physical presence. And then having a plan in advance and a back pocket question. Just like David said, sometimes he will excuse himself to the bathroom or whatever, whatever your back pocket bailout is. But have that ready so that when you feel activated, you can take action and use one of your coping mechanisms instead of staying in the moment and exploding. Milestone 3 is developing a growth mindset. We're going to talk a lot more about growth mindset in a few slides, but essentially it is embracing challenges and being thankful for the opportunity to improve. And that is not something that comes naturally or easy. It is practiced. Practicing being thankful for challenges in your life is one of the most difficult, but also one of the most essential and rewarding things that you can do. Number 4, strengthen your resilience through mindfulness and self-care. Practice grounding techniques. Now, I said we would talk about some of those down the road, but I'll give you the general gist of it. One thing that you can do anytime you feel yourself activated is reconnect with all 5 senses. You don't have to say it out loud. Nobody has to know you're doing it, but stop and think, what do I hear right now? What do I smell right now? What do my toes feel on the ground or in my shoes? Clearly I'm from Appalachia because the first place I went was barefoot. Anyway, milestone 5, enhance your adaptability and flexibility in high pressure situations. Now you might say, well, I'm in this class because I don't know how to do that. So how do I do that? Well, you practice. Practice quickly pivoting. Practice being grateful. Practice thanking the obstacle or the challenge for the opportunity to grow.
If I might add something to that, Jessica?
Sure.
So, we are going to get into a little bit more specifics on how to do some of these things throughout the milestone steps. However, I want to share something with you right now that is quite specific. So, how do we practice? Well, we put ourselves in situations that cause us to be or need us to be flexible and adaptive, okay? And they can be very, very simple. Cooking, if you're not a good cook or if you haven't cooked a lot, following a recipe. Sometimes as you follow a recipe, okay, first of all, it's a new skill. So that's always going to cause stress, right? But building the skill builds the muscle of being resilient and of building confidence and so forth and so on. But let's say you're building this new skill, it's already stressful, you are already building up your ability to be resilient. You find, because you haven't prepared yourself, that as you've been going through halfway of the recipe, you are missing an ingredient, right? You didn't do what's called mise en place, which is getting all of your ingredients first and in place so that the recipe can actually happen. So you have to flex, right? Well, here's the problem, right? Dinner's needing to be ready because the kids are hungry, they're starving. They've let you know that 17 times after you told them you were getting dinner ready. They can see you're cooking it. Please, God, help me, right? So we have to pivot, we have to flex. Can I use whole milk instead of cream? Yes, I can. Is it going to be the end of the world? No, it's not. We're still going to eat. They're probably going to complain about it anyway. Let's breathe, right? Another activity, right, is being able to put yourself in situations that actually create a tense scenario, much like cooking, that are quite intense. So I typically recommend things like jiu-jitsu. There is nothing that helps you build up your ability to be resilient in stressful situations than when someone is trying to choke you out with your consent, okay? All right, with your consent, right? Because you're paying a monthly fee, you're learning a skill, but when someone is on top of you, right, and they weigh you more than you by 50, 60, or even 100 pounds, and it's your job to think about how to get out or how to defend against the choke or how even to just breathe and survive, this is tempering you against situations that you might find yourself at work. So that is an example of what we're talking about here, right? Practice quickly pivoting. Even if you are presenting, think about how you can roll with the punches, for example, like when the sound doesn't work, right? And you're giving a presentation, right?
Very good example. Thank you. Okay, so we're at milestone 6. Milestone 6 is to foster resilience through supportive relationships. All the way up until milestone 6, we were on our own. We were practicing on our own. At this point, it is incredibly important to connect the work that you are doing to a peer that you trust, that can support you. Finding a mentor is incredibly helpful because if we've got all the infrastructure we need internally, but it reaches its maximum, or we don't quite know how to deal with a new situation, you've got one more tool in your pocket, which is external support to lean on to figure out that scenario. So having both internal and external support, because this is a very difficult journey and it's a very difficult thing to learn. So if you can have supportive relationships that help you down that journey, you will get there faster, easier, and have a much better time. And then lastly is continuously learning and evolving your resilience strategies. So you're never done. Milestone 7 is just a reminder that it's never over. We've never fully reached whatever we're trying to reach, which we talked about yesterday, reaching perfection. Some people felt that that should be excellence, not necessarily perfection, which is fine, just a different lens. But to me, if you're comparing today, no matter how much practice you've done, no matter how much work you've done, if you're comparing where you're at to your idea of perfection, it's simply telling you how much more wiggle room you have to improve. And fun fact, you're always going to have wiggle room to improve. Oops. So Dr. Jacob Teebs is a psychologist at Yale School of Medicine, and he says it's important to know that resilience is not something that is inside you, rather a process influenced as much or more by factors outside the person that can lead to better health. Sorry, there's a delay. So some physical stress management techniques. We talked about breathing deeply. Progressive muscle relaxation is a really good one, especially if you're like me and you're incredibly resistant to actually relaxing. So progressive muscle relaxation starts at your toes. You tense them until they're at muscle failure, and you let go. Work up your ankles, legs, all the way up until you get to your neck, your hands, your head, your face. Tense them up until you can't tense them anymore. And then when you let go, the muscles at muscle failure, your entire body has just released its tension. Mindfulness, meditation, being present, going through your 5 senses is always helpful if you're in an activated state. And then positive self-talk. I talk about that a lot in a lot of our trainings. And the first thing that I will tell you is listen to how you speak to yourself, and then listen to how you speak to someone you love. If there's a mismatch, something's wrong. It's really, really hard to do. But speak to yourself like you were speaking to someone you love. And I saw a really good example of this that took it actually a step farther. It was on TikTok. And a gentleman was talking about how he learned to respect and love himself. And what he said was, I imagine that my body is borrowed from someone I love. So maybe it's your kid or your spouse or whatever. Imagine this body is theirs that you're borrowing. How do you care for it now? If I am borrowing one of my children's bodies, right, I'm going to put healthy food in it. I'm going to talk to it nicely. I'm going to support, encourage. I might actually exercise for once. All of the things that I want for someone I love, we need to practice wanting those for ourselves. And then lastly, it's just an external technique to reduce stress ahead of time. Prioritizing, setting boundaries, and automate as many boring things as you possibly can. Because the more you can take off the boring and unfulfilling tasks, the more of your time gets spent on what fills your well, what gives you spoons. Did you want to add anything, David?
I did. Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate it. So let's go back to breathing deeply. So how do we do that? I recommend box breathing, okay? Box breathing is simple. There's 4 sides to a box or to a square. You're going to, at the top of the square, imagine this, let me come here, okay? You're going to, at the top of the box, breathe in through your nose, very important, not the mouth, through your nose for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you hold that breath for 4 seconds. Then through your mouth, you breathe out for 4 seconds. And then you hold again until you get to the very top of that square, and you repeat the process of breathing in through your nose for 4 seconds, holding, breathing out for 4, holding again. And you do this 4 times. 4 seconds, each side, 4 sides, 4 repetitions. When you breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, you're utilizing the diaphragm. This is oxygenating your blood a lot more. It's helping reduce cortisol levels. And actually, if you do it quite well, you will get a little bit of a buzz. Now, don't come to work high or drunk or stoned or anything like that, but breathing deeply and catching a buzz from the oxygen is acceptable, right? So please do this. It is a great way to level things off. You can do it quickly. It takes a few seconds, right? I don't know the math on it, okay? But it's not that long, okay? 4 times 4 is what? 16. 16 times 4, you get it. You can do the math, okay? I got a psychology degree because the math requirement was low, but you get it. All right, so let's breathe deeply. Now that box breathing technique isn't just something that I recommend. I stole it from the Navy SEALs. And if you really think about what the Navy SEALs are good at, what their specialty is, it isn't, extraction and breaking into, the enemy's base. It's performing under stress. And this is how they do it. Now, they also utilize positive self-talk. They say things to themselves like, piece of cake, easy day. I got this, no problem. We're gonna get it done. It's already done. I am the man, I am the woman. Piece of cake, easy day. Because the brain recognizes speech and will take it as it is. You can quite literally trick your brain into believing that you are happy, right? And it will make you happy by saying, I am happy. I am capable. This is easy. I got this. Nothing can hurt me. Okay? Watch what you say and how you say it. Because the brain itself and what it believes based on what you say is a very powerful force. The research shows that we can quite literally change the way that we interact and our body interacts with our environment by changing the way we speak. And if you don't believe me, this is why almost every single scientific study that has anything to do with medication, for example, always takes into consideration the placebo effect, because it can be as powerful as 20 to 30%. Think about that. A sugar pill can cause anywhere between a 20 to 30% change for the positive in a patient because they believe it's going to help them. Remember this.
So adding those stress management techniques to our resilience toolkit. No, I want to hit it twice. Can you switch from that? There it goes. Okay, so adding those stress management techniques to our resilience toolkit. We've got our mindfulness practices, so deep breathing, sensory check-ins, promoting present moment awareness. We talked about having a social support network. We'll touch a little bit on self-care. Let's talk about cognitive reframing. So we're in charge of the stories we tell ourselves, right? If, going back to my spoon theory, if the guy that cut me off almost ran me off the road, if I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this jerk, he doesn't care that he almost harmed me, he almost put me in a ditch, what a selfish person, I'm saying all these things to myself that I have no actual knowledge of. I don't know if that's true or not. But what I could say is, oh my gosh, that guy's wife is in labor. I hope they make it to the hospital in time. Doesn't have to be true, right? I just have to reframe how I think about that, because at the end of the day, who is harmed by my thoughts? Me. Goal setting and planning. This is actually, it sounds weird, but one of my favorite resilience tools, because setting short-term goals and long-term goals, it's the combination of both, is actually practicing hope. You're practicing looking forward to maybe just that dopamine hit when you finish a task and you feel satisfied that it's been completed. Or, and that's where the short-term goals come in, because it's feeding that dopamine response. You can literally get yourself addicted to hope. Or long-term goals, so that you've always got something to look forward to. It retrains your brain to think positively about the future. And then positive reappraisal, kind of the same thing as cognitive reframing, just a different way. It's shifting your thinking about, it gives the pandemic example, what it prevented you from doing, over to what it actually meant you could do. Oh, okay. So now let's talk about fixed mindset versus growth mindset. So we talked a lot about how to build a growth mindset, viewing challenges as, I'll keep going. Viewing challenges as opportunities to improve. Can everybody still hear me?
You're good.
Okay. Embracing constructive feedback. I love getting constructive feedback as long as it's done respectfully, because they're literally giving me the roadmap on how to succeed, how to win. Focus on the process, not the end result, because it actually reminds me of, David, your story about cooking, about your mother and what she said about there's no love in that. You want to tell that story really quick?
Sure, yeah. So, well, my mother, God rest her soul, was a very assertive person according to the street definition, meaning that she would tell you like it was, not in a way that was non-offensive or non-destructive. So my mother would consistently tell people what her opinion was, even if it was going to hurt their feelings. And one Thanksgiving, particularly, she told her sister-in-law, who had attempted to mistakenly recreate my mother's green salsa. And my mother tasted it and said, wow, there's no love in this. And as you can tell, that was pretty harsh and definitely hurt my aunt's feelings and caused quite a rift between the two of them for many, many years. Things actually never were the same. But you see, when this type of thing happens, it's important to take a look at the content of and the delivery of the comment itself. So, was it rude? Yes. Was it offensive? Yes. Did it hurt my feelings? Yes. What did she actually mean, right, by there's no love, okay? That translates to something. Were the tomatillos not roasted long enough, okay? Was there chunks when it should be smoother? Does that mean or translate to her that I rushed the salsa, okay? Was there not enough salt, which means I didn't taste it, okay? So what is there that I can learn from this offensive and destructive comment, right? That's the growth mindset. And when you remove the emotion and look at what can be taken from the comment, regardless of how it was sent, right? You have the ability to emotionally detach and make improvements. And if there is a best revenge, right? It isn't getting back at someone, it's improving, it's getting better. You see?
Thank you, David. That was exactly where I was going with that. So, being inspired by others' success, that's one more thing that you're practicing. You are practicing celebrating success, and your brain and your body react as though it was your success when you are truly inspired by someone else's win. Stepping out of your comfort zone, David kind of talked about that a little bit. I often encourage people to do something that is terrifying but safe. So, for example, maybe you're afraid of public speaking. Go to an improv class. Or if you are worried about your art skills, go to one of those sip and paint things where everybody sees you painting. Because the more you get used to stepping outside of your comfort zone, the bigger your comfort zone gets. Learn and grow from failures, always, and to believe that talent is ever improving. At the end of the day, you can never be there. You have to constantly be going there. Fixed mindset is feeling threatened by other success, refusing to receive criticism or feedback, not accepting failures or mistakes, shying away from unfamiliar things. And you may say, well, that's just how I am. That's just my nature. Well, again, none of this is describing someone's status at birth and forever. All of these things are things that we actually have the power to control, to grow, to change, to strengthen certain pathways in the brain, to weaken others. Did it? Try it again. So having a fixed mindset can actually be very detrimental to your physical brain. It can cause amygdala enlargement. So when the amygdala gets bigger, the amygdala controls emotional reactions and also the intensity of those reactions. So when your amygdala is enlarged, You're going to have stronger, bigger emotions that are harder to control, harder to feel, to process in a healthy way, harder to deal with. You will have increased moodiness. It leads to heightened emotional reactions. And the pathway in the brain from a relaxed state to a stressed state becomes shorter and more sensitive, because the brain is always trying to make shortcuts to whatever you're using the most, which is why practice is so incredibly important, because you can strengthen those pathways where you want them if you do it in a very mindful, focused, and intentional way. Okay. So it causes decreased connectivity where we want connectivity between different brain regions. Long-term stress that's unmanaged. So if you have a fixed mindset, you've got a very small comfort zone, right? And a lot more things stress you out. So having that long-term increased stress causes a reduction in the connectivity between different parts of the brain. Specifically, the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for all of our rational thought. That's your control. That's your intentionality, right? So it also can lead to impairments in cognitive abilities, reduced creativity, diminished working memory, and compromised problem-solving skills. So basically, there is no status situation. You're either practicing getting better and getting better at practicing, or you're getting worse if you're not doing it. You're losing connectivity. Did you want to add something?
I wanted to, yes,
Oh,
I did,
okay.
but I wanted to wait for you.
Okay, I'll finish. So neuroplasticity disruption. So again, the more you practice or the more you don't practice, the more disruption in the brain to all the parts that you want to be connected. And it can cause actual structural changes that you can see on an MRI. A thinning of the prefrontal cortex, a reduction in volume of the brain regions associated with memory and learning. How much more frustrating is the world going to be if learning gets harder, right? So it's a cyclical thing. You're going to get hard. It's going to get harder. You're going to get more frustrated. You're going to get more stressed. You're going to learn less. You're going to remember less. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jessica. So this is really, really good stuff, obviously, because Jessica did a lot of the work right here, right? Okay, so what's important to understand is that the fixed mindset is, in many ways, a fancy way of saying it's a closed-minded approach to life, okay? And we know that this has physical and physiological and psychological implications that are negative. What I recall when I hear this is an old quote. And that quote is that strong men, and in this case today, women, make for good times and easy times. And good and easy times make for weak men and women. And weak men and women make for hard times. And through those hard times, we then get back to the beginning, which is strong men and strong women. You see, the human mind, the body, the spirit, our ability to be resilient, requires tempering. It requires that we go through things. It requires that we suffer. It requires that we have not only the right mindset, right, but that we put ourselves in positions to grow. The muscle cannot grow without stress. And in fact, it shows through research and science that significant trauma to the muscle must be applied in order for it to grow. Okay? So with our spirit, which is what I believe resilience is really kind of all about, we must put ourselves in situations that are difficult, because the person who has never experienced difficulty cannot handle it. Now you might be thinking, well, Dave, that's why I'm here. I'm experiencing a lot of trauma. I'm experiencing a lot of stress. I've got a lot going on here. What are you talking about, man? I should be the most resilient, tempered person that's out there. Well, I get it. Life is hard. It absolutely is. Work is harder than it ever has been. We are asked to do more with much, much less than we ever have been before, right? COVID changed a lot, but it really, really affected us in many negative ways, right? I used to be just, gorgeous, and now look at me, right? I'm balding, my hair is gray, I'm 35 pounds overweight, blah, 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 right? So I get it. But if you're going to take something away from today and what we've talked about so far, it is that the way that you see what's going on right now matters. The what of what you tell yourself about what is happening matters. And if you utilize some of the techniques that we're talking about, even if it's just one, even if it's learning how to tense your muscles, learning how to breathe and relax and take a step back, or remove yourself when you feel the emotions that you understand are triggers, rising up, right? You're going to get on a path to creating more of an ability for you to navigate those rough seas and to sail more smoothly as things come and as they are presented to you. Does that make sense? Right? Okay.
All right, so we've just learned that brain pattern recognition, our brains are very good at recognizing patterns and automating. They're always automating, creating direct pathways or associations. And in this instance, it could be a direct association between work and feeling awful. That's called burnout. Entrenched negative connection is when that's gone on for a very long time and a deep-rooted link has been formed now. There's a chronic stress cycle where you're emptying the well. You're working until you're absolutely done for the day, every single day. So something I learned in researching burnout and stress and long-term stress effects is that it takes at least 2 days to recover from full and complete exhaustion, mental exhaustion. However, if you leave a little bit in the well, if you go home when you're not quite smoked, when you're not quite spent for the day, you will replenish your energy, your capacity much, much more quickly. However, if you find yourself in a chronic stress cycle where you are constantly just empty at the end of every day, it creates a chemical imbalance of low dopamine, high cortisol, which then takes us back to all those really scary statistics on the effects, the physical effects on the brain. So how do we break the cycle? We understand how the connections form, and then we can control them. We are more intentional about what pathways we're going to allow to strengthen and what pathways we want to allow to fade away. I like fade it till you make it, because it works. You want to add anything?
Yeah, so I'm again reminded of some research and a TED Talk that I saw by a psychologist, a PhD, who specialized in stress. And for the majority of her career, 20 plus years, studied, talked about, researched, and taught people about the negative effects of stress on the body. And then she began to do some research on stress in a different way, specifically how people thought about it. And she found and saw that research participants and people who applied a different mindset to stress changed the way it affected them. So if you are, in short, able to think about stress as not harmful, that it's not only something that destroys you, that burns you out, but that it's something that helps you, that's something that, for example, focuses you, allows you to get things done, allows you to perform at high levels. What they saw is that incidents of heart disease, heart attack, stroke fell. Because when people think about stress differently and they think of it as a tool, as rocket fuel, as opposed to poison and toxin, the body reacted differently. And in fact, those who had that mindset started living longer or just as long as those who didn't have the stress in their life whatsoever. So it's important to understand that, yes, breaking the cycle and understanding the negative effects of stress are important, but because the mind is so powerful, okay, we know that it can change the way that it affects our body. Now, if we continue to do things in the same way, we're going to get the same results. So we have to, as Jessica stated, interrupt our patterns. We have to identify them first, but interrupt them. So I'm burnt out physically, mentally, psychologically. Well, if you keep going the way that you're going, nothing's going to change. So how do I interrupt it? We've talked about a couple different things. We've talked about breathing. We've talked about expressing concern, building a community, getting a support system, understanding your triggers, defining undesirable behavior so that you can replace it with desirable behavior. However, what's most important is think about what structurally can I do and create a habit around that will change how my environment affects me. Walking away earlier from the day is one of the best things that you can do, because there is the law of diminishing returns, and studies show that 55 hours per week, after that is exceeded, I see eyebrows lifting in my room here, show that productivity and performance and accuracy dramatically decreases for every hour after 55 hours. And in fact, errors go up and you just don't work the way that you're supposed to. Now, after 55 hours, right, not only does all of that happen, but guess what? Your personal life suffers, your sleep suffers, your nutrition suffers. Many other factors begin to fail. So learn to walk away earlier. Learn to utilize the rule of 55, right, as a reminder that you cannot continue to work. Now, time management, which was on a few previous slides, doesn't mean that you shouldn't do all the things that you need to do. And it doesn't mean that you need to organize and have a calendar as the end-all be-all. While those are all good, it's important to prioritize the tasks that you have. And as a measure of getting things done, take 10 minutes at the beginning and or at the end of the day to think about what it is that needs to be done and one or two steps that you can take in order to get those things done from most important to least important before the day begins or before you get sleep. You're going to sleep better knowing that you've got a plan, knowing what you're going to do tomorrow, and or you can revisit that in the morning to maybe add one or two things or reshuffle some things. This practice focuses you. It allows you to be present and mindful. It allows you to breathe and take a moment to breathe and then know what you're going to do in order to break the cycle and follow the law of 55.
Thank you.
Clicked it too.
Uh-oh.
I do it manually. There you go.
Okay, so the opposite side of the coin is self-care, of knowing yourself, is self-care. So we talked earlier about knowing what your triggers are, knowing where your limits are. I call it knowing where your edges are. That's an old roller derby term. But the opposite, or the flip side of that same coin, is also knowing yourself well enough to know what fills your well. Dr. Sukyoung Suh has an exercise that she does, and it's wonderful. She shared it with me. I actually did it with my kids, and it is basically a way of finding out what fills your well. So it talks about the different categories of human needs, connection, I forget what some of the others are, but what you need to feel fulfilled in each of the categories. And it sounds like, okay, well, I already know what I like to do, but it's not the same as knowing what you like to do. It's knowing what gave you a boost, what gave you some spoons back, what increased your capacity. And that should be the self-care that we engage in. When everybody started talking about self-care at the beginning of COVID, I didn't know what they meant. So I was like, awesome. I'm going to eat cupcakes in bed and take a bubble bath and drink a bottle of wine. And none of those things were actually self-care. They were just things I felt like doing.
So that's what we call maladaptive behaviors?
Yes.
But that's okay because you've learned, right? And while, so it's like one of those things where the devil will tell you 9 truths for a lie. So here's the thing. A bubble bath and a glass of wine and a cupcake is self-care, right? when you have that bath and that glass and that cupcake and you pair it with good conversation that's constructive with another person, right? Talking about what's going on, what happened, you're offloading, you're creating that support system, you're breathing during that conversation, right? You're alliterating your feelings, you're addressing them, you're identifying them. That is adaptive. When you take that bath alone with the bottle, with the dozen cupcakes and no conversation, that's when it crosses that line. Does that make sense? Right? It's the same thing. Like, I'm going to go run a 5K. Fine. That's great. I'm going to go to the gym for 5 hours tonight, skip a meal, right, and then watch YouTube all night so that I can build my bodybuilding career because it's going to make me feel better. Maladaptive. Do you see?
Yep. Yep. Thank you. Oh, okay. So how do we take everything that we've learned so far and apply this to our teams? So if we're a leader within the organization, the first step to building a resilient team, before any of the other things we've talked about, is to make sure that there is a state of psychological safety within your team. So that means that everyone on the team feels safe to challenge, safe to learn, safe to be included, and I forget what the fourth one was, safe to question, possibly? Anyway.
Yes.
Is that it? Okay, awesome. So we want to cultivate a growth mindset with our staff, with our team, and that means, going back to that psychological safety, if a team member is throwing out a brand new idea, never been tested, never been talked about before, creating the psychological safety so that they can feel safe, cultivating the growth mindset. Your staff or your team have to feel as though they won't be, punished and kicked off the island for a minimal mistake, because those mistakes are our growth opportunities. Those are our chances to learn. So fostering open communication is incredibly helpful for promoting psychological safety and cultivating a growth mindset. And then also we need to realize everybody is coming here from a different place. Sometimes we need to be particularly purposeful in recognizing the diversity on the team and including that diversity. It's not enough to realize that you have a diverse team, diverse ideas, diverse backgrounds, diverse training. We have to also include it. So that's why diversity and inclusion need to be said together. And then providing support and resources. So if you can mentor someone, they're mentoring you back. They're teaching you how to be a better mentor at all times, which gives you both that growth. And then lastly is encourage self-care and well-being. We are whole people at work and outside of work. So if your staff needs to take care of themselves, we don't want them to be afraid to do that. The work has to be done, but promoting a work-life balance and teaching stress management techniques helps them to gain all of these other aspects of resilient team. Boop. So this is the resilience advantage. The more you practice, the better you'll get at getting better. So oftentimes we see improved well-being and life satisfaction, enhanced productivity and work performance, increased emotional intelligence and self-regulation, and then stronger relationships and social support. Those relationships get stronger because we have to be vulnerable to actually have a growth mindset. And the more you practice being vulnerable with others and allowing other people to feel safe being vulnerable with you, the stronger the relationship gets, the stronger the support is that both of you get from that relationship. Okay, so this is just a summary of what we've learned so far. Recognizing the challenges, you got to name it. Intentionally reframing and shifting perspective, you got to decide to work on it. Reinforce those strengths, keep practicing. Renew commitment. If you think you're there, you're not there. Keep trying. And then lastly, reflect and refine. Continuously adapt and iterate new strategies. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so thank you, Jessica. I really appreciate that. Great summary. What I also want to recommend is that you recall and remember that while these are some absolutely fantastic, it's not while, these are some absolutely fantastic and wonderful strategies and things to consider, it's also very important to remember that while you do the things to build yourself up so that you can handle stress, it's important to remember that we carry a resident amount of lava with us, and that it is important that you address that. Just like the volcano that has a resident level of lava that's always there, right? No matter how much builds up and how much we siphon off to remove the capacity for that volcano to explode, the more work we do to lower that resident level of lava makes our journey so much better as we develop our level to be resilient, our adaptive skills, et cetera, et cetera. So I recommend that you consider doing the work. What is that work? We speak, we identify, we let it out. What are some ways to let it out? Coaching, physical and or mental activities like exercise that is mindful. For example, if I'm walking to relieve stress, I walk and I breathe, telling myself, I'm walking, it's good for me, I'm letting this out. This is the time that I get to build up my resilience and quite literally breathe out and work out the stress, the anxiety, the fear, the frustration that I have at work. The other piece is, of course, work with people who are professionals. It is advice, not everybody needs it, but it is helpful and adaptive to speak with someone, whether that be a coach or a mental health care practitioner, that is going to understand, be there, support with you, hold space, and help you reconcile that which needs to be reconciled that is causing that level of resident lava to be much higher than it should be. Okay, you have an oil change guy, you have a guy that comes to your house to spray for ants, to fix the roof, to cut your lawn, to do whatever it is, right? You have a primary care physician. Everybody should consider getting someone to take care of their mind as well.
Thank you. Well, that's all I have for now. If anybody wants to send any questions, comments, concerns in the chat or by email later, you know how to get a hold of us. And thank you for coming.
Cheers, everybody. Thank you.
Jennifer said those are great photos of you both.
Oh,
Nice. Thank you, Jennifer.
I stole yours off the internet.
Thank you. I'm much younger and thinner. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
So, coffee bean, you know, the coffee bean versus like an egg, and I was reading this to my kids last night. So you put a carrot in hot water or egg in hot water, one gets soft, one gets hard. What happens to the coffee bean? Do you know this?
No.
Have you heard this before? So the coffee bean